Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here this morning for our presentation on human resource practices. Just try to see where the feedback's coming from. I'm sorry. And we have the pleasure of having Cheryl Krieger and Leslie Carlson with us today. I'd like to begin with prayer, and then I will formally introduce Cheryl and Leslie to the group. I did email the prayer to everyone, and as I had mentioned previously, we've been using prayers from a really good book that I would encourage you to get if you don't have it. It's called Redeeming Administration by Anne Garrido. So placing ourselves in God's presence, we pray. O God, in the opening words of Scripture, you said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Throughout the Bible, we see time and again that whatever you say comes to be. You, O Lord, possess perfect integrity. Your word and your action are one and the same. There is nothing incongruent between what you say and what you do. But it is not so with me, O God. The gap between what I advocate and what I actually do is sometimes wide and deep. May my work call me to ever greater integrity, O Lord. Open my eyes and my heart to the opportunities for change and growth that you continually place before me. Amen. Okay, so as I said, we have the pleasure of having Cheryl Krieger and Leslie Carlson with us today. Cheryl Krieger is the president of Mercy High School, Farmington Hills in Michigan, and has served 48 years in education in a plethora of roles. She received her bachelor's and her master's degree from Eastern Michigan University and her Doctor of Education in Administration and Supervision from Wayne State University. Her experience spans as president of Mercy High School in Farmington Hills. She served as superintendent of the Chemos Public School, associate superintendent for curriculum instruction, assessment, and strategic planning for Dearborn Public Schools, and director of special services for the Dearborn Public Schools in many programs dealing with students at risk. She's been a principal, an assistant principal, and teacher, and also an adjunct faculty member at Wayne State University and the University of Michigan in Dearborn. Cheryl is a Mercy graduate herself, belongs to many professional organizations, and is also a Mercy associate. Leslie Carlson has over 25 years experience in human resources working in the private and nonprofit sectors, including 2 companies named to the Fortune 500 list of best places to work, achieving 1 designation under her HR leadership. She has worked in a variety of settings, including information technology, communications, retail, legal, marketing, and many others. In addition, she established and managed a professional services consulting company that specialized in strategic planning, leadership development, and organizational design. Leslie earned her bachelor's degree in human resource development from Oakland University in Rochester Hills, Michigan, and her master's degree in human resource administration from Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. She joined Our Lady of Mercy School for Young Women in Rochester, New York, as the Director of Human Resources in February of 2018. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Leslie and Cheryl and thank them for being with us this morning. So, Cheryl, I think you're going to get started.
Yes. Well, good morning. It's our pleasure to be here and as your guest and having this conversation with our fellow colleagues. Well, today's presentation, I just want to frame it for you a little, give you a little framework. It is intended to be a beginning conversation on a very, very complex topic. It isn't meant to be the end all and be all, but we hope it is the beginning of some thought about this whole area of your job responsibilities, and that you can go forward from here, and we can even, if needed, focus more on other times. And as a starting point, it was a response to conversations in the various cohort groups on both the content and the approach today. Anyway, the beginning for how we're going to focus. It will address what it means to be mission and value driven. And it will address also how being mission and value driven affect the organization and the individuals in it. We will explore different models of human resources because there are many and there is not a one-size-fits-all. And we'll discuss opportunities to represent the employee voice at the human resources table. And of course, at the end, we'll provide time for any questions and discussion you may have. And if anything comes up before the end of the presentation, you're certainly welcome to ask me if it involves my presentation. Okay, next slide. Well, human resources is, first of all, a very complex function. And it doesn't matter the size of your organization or where you are located, it is always complex and involves the same things. And it's complex for a number of reasons. First of all, it involves people who in and of themselves are complex. It involves the morale of individuals and the organization. It involves the lives and the livelihoods of all the people who work in our organizations. And any decisions that are made not only impact these individuals, but also the future of the organization and different situations that may come up. For instance, if there's an exception for one person, should all have the opportunity to have that same exception. Next, human resources just isn't cut and dried. It's not formulaic. It's all about problem solving and finding the best solutions for your school and for individuals. For instance, you may be faced with limited resources and how money will be used for, should it be put into things that impact the individuals in your school? Should it go into salaries? Should it go into professional development? All those decisions and affect the whole organization as well as individuals and the functioning of people and how it affects students. And once again, it involves emotional intelligence and soft skills, as well as the hard facts about human resources themselves. And next, in a mercy school, it's certainly human resources and the way we deal with one another should be mission and value driven. That should set us apart. Decisions aren't just expedient. They aren't just one-off decisions, but once again, we have our mission. We have the charism of the Sisters of of mercy, we have our school histories and our values, which should influence each and everything that we do. All right, next slide. I'd like to spend a little time on why human resources is complex and just how comprehensive the functions are. And once again, no matter the size of your organization or where you are located, every organization has these same functions as part of their human resources duties. And no matter what your position in a school, if it's administrative, some part of this will affect your job duties. So even if you have a designated human resources department, as we mention these things, think in terms of your job and what the responsibilities mean in terms of your position. Okay, first of all, human resources includes recruiting, hiring, and evaluating employees. So again, those structures and functions should be in place, and your role should be defined. And these also involve processes that should reflect your values and vision for the school. So our other employees, in addition to you, part of that recruiting process? Are employees part of their own evaluation? And what does that evaluation look like? Who is involved in hiring? Are people who are affected by a position involved in that hiring? Do they have voice? All these things should affect, again, how you do business and should reflect your vision, mission, and values for the school. Human resources is responsible for organizing compensation, benefits, and working conditions. And it's clear that all these conditions affect the health, both psychological and physical, of the employees. They would reflect morale, and again, should reflect our values. If you have a value of human dignity, how does that affect how you do this business? As far as school and welcoming to your organization, the human resources function provides orientation, training throughout one's career, and professional development. And again, if done well, all these functions positively support the ability for every employee to do his or her job. All these factors, again, affect workplace climate and the relationships within. How do people communicate? What is the climate for communication, both content and process and tone? All these things, again, should reflect the values of the school. And then there are the outside influences on human resources. We are affected not only by things within our school, but there are laws, equal opportunity, that affect us. We have to pay taxes many times, or our employees do. We have to provide for that. Being not for profit, we often don't have to pay taxes, but we certainly have to offer our employees, when appropriate, the Social Security, and payroll should reflect those laws, income tax, state tax, if and when it applies. And lastly, one size does not fit all. Programs and approaches to human resources may vary among every organization, and they do reflect size of an organization, mission, need, and again, should positively reflect mission, vision, and values of the organization. And those who have these responsibilities should be very well aware of how what they personally do impacts each and every part of the organization. All right. Next slide, please. Well, what does it mean to be mission, vision, and value driven? And how should things be different at a Mercy School than other places of business? First of all, every Mercy School has its own mission, vision, and value statements that, as I said, do affect how they carry out that human resources role. We also reflect the critical concerns of the Sisters of Mercy and the charism also of the Sisters of Mercy. And this sets us aside from other organizations. And we are very blessed because everyone that partakes and participates or is affected by our organization shares the same mission, vision, and values for our schools. It's a wonderful reference point for everything we do. And there is a challenge to this. The challenge is just to say we have these things is part of it, but putting it into action each and every day takes work, effort, focus, and many processes before it becomes automatic. All these things have to become part of our DNA. And it's not enough merely to have these references. Again, we have to utilize them, refer to them, and make use of them if we are to be different. All right, next slide, please. If we say we are mission, vision, and values driven, evidence of these things should be everywhere. For instance, you can see behind me a little red plaque on the wall. You probably can't see what it is, but every single room in our school has a mission statement that is posted, and we refer to that. Likewise, as in all your schools, probably every single room has either a mercy cross or a traditional crucifix, reminding us of our Catholic and Christian roots for all we do. So there are other places that we should be able to see what we say we are about. It should be referenced in your strategic plan. You should have a strategic plan that drives your organization, and this mission, vision, values, etc. should all be referenced and part of the strategic plan. You should have an employee handbook that begins with these same things as well. And I'm sure everyone in their publications references the values, the virtues that you to which you prescribe, as well as your mission statement. Orientation and hiring practices should also reflect all these things. Again, if you even have values, for instance, of collegiality, participation, then orientation and hiring will be part of that. People will be involved. There should be processes for participation so that everyone has advocacy and voice and feels included in the organization. And there should be many, many school traditions, sharing, stories, common bonds. All these, again, are not required by law, but they are value added to any human resources and their functions that are part of your school. It is value added, the basis for relationships, And human resources and functions are all part of those relationships and problem solving. Okay, next slide, please. Another thing that I would like to talk about, lest we see human resources only as the function of administration. It really speaks to, of its very nature, about engagement of employees, that they have to be part of, not only involved in your school, in your organization, but it has to be more than just a job. And there are many ways to get people involved. Employees cannot be anonymous. For starters, all the administrators should know everyone's names. They should be able to have conversations, both informal and very positive, interactions. Again, many times you hear the term lead with your feet. I can tell you that any positive and neutral relationships with employees will not be wasted, because then when either that employee needs something or you need to approach an employee, you have a basis for that relationship. Neither of you are operating in a vacuum. So relationships. Know not only the names of your employees, but things about them. Sit side by side with them. Have functions, be able to eat with them, share stories, and make sure that they are part of the functioning of the school. The work for all employees must be relevant, and they must be able to see how they affect, in the case of a school, students, families, and one another. I think when one is employed in a business, sometimes looking for a relevancy in your work either is a stretch or something that you really have to seek for yourself. When one is involved in a mercy school, with the critical concerns, with knowing that Catherine Macaulay herself thought that the most important work to society is the education of young women, it's very easy to see how relevant the work is of a Catholic school, especially in today's world with our values and all that our graduates contribute to the world afterwards. But again, it's important that every single employee, whether faculty, staff, administrator, understands how their work is important to achieving the mission of the school. So again, not only as administrators and as you are able to read in the mission statement and publications and learning through orientation and employee handbooks, but the other side of it is there has to be a reflective piece also, that every employee has the opportunity to see how they personally affect the organization and one another. So again, the custodians know immediately that when there is an open house or a play or some event going on at school, if the school is not in top-notch physical shape, how it affects what we're able to do. And teachers each and every day, sometimes it's hard to know if they're being successful each and every day, but certainly in the long term, they can see the impact on lives, not only test scores and things like that, but on individual lives of students. Okay. And these facts, I would like to document that there is a book that's a quick read, Patrick Lencioni, The Truth About Employee Engagement. And it's told as in a parable. It's really a quick read and very enlightening. So if you have a moment, you can look that up and read it. Okay. Next slide. So here is always the hard part for administration. It's our responsibility to lead by example in putting that mission, vision, and values to work and to engage employees. Just even simple things. Do we always start the decision-making process, a search process, a staff meeting with a prayer? Do we understand that when we have a staff meeting after school, our staff might be tired and hungry? Are we able to provide, even if it's a small snack for them? I know this past week, for instance, our principal, with the snow days and cold days and having to rely on everyone to be flexible, our principal provided a very, very nice welcome back breakfast opportunity and snack opportunity today. So every little thing, again, positive experiences and neutral experience such as that show appreciation, kind words that cost us nothing, are all part of what make our organization tick and the human resources aspect of it tick. Never will you ever be, shall I say, sad or regret that you have taken time to engage all the people who work in our buildings. It will serve you well. So before I turn the presentation over to Leslie, who will get into some of the nitty-gritty, is there anyone who has any specific questions for me? No? Okay.
Does anyone remember you need to unmute yourself? So, does anyone have a comment or a question for Cheryl?
Okay. Well, thank you. Leslie, I will turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I thank you for setting up this part of the presentation so well. My portion will involve talking about some of the structuring options that you may have in your own schools around human resources. And I will also reiterate some of the critical areas of responsibility and some of the challenges that go along with some of those human resources responsibilities. And then after that, I will also open up this portion of the presentation for questions. So with that, I want to take an opportunity to thank Cheryl for talking about some of the functional areas of human resources and some of the challenges that come along with those. And I want to take the opportunity to reiterate what some of those areas are, because we know that not one size fits all, and that there are many, many topics that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, either in human resources or wherever the human resources function is administered from in your schools. We work on staffing. We work on, and key stakeholders for staffing, of course, would be our administration. We administer compensation. Again, key stakeholders being our finance department and our administration. We administer our employee benefit and welfare programs. We are a voice of both employees, faculty, administrators, staff in the employee relations function, which can involve quite a bit of problem resolution and problem solving and interpersonal negotiations. We are responsible for compliance and reporting, everything from demographics of our staff population to ensuring that our practices and policies and procedures are in compliance with our state and federal laws. Organizational design, which is kind of fancy words for ensuring we have the right people on the right seats on the bus. Job descriptions, day-to-day responsibilities. Do we have people crossing over into either other roles or taking work along with them when they go to a different role in the organization? Is it compensated correctly? Do we have the right FLSA status? And so on. Training and development. How do we partner with administration to work on any training and development opportunities for our staff? A significant portion of training and development is also administered through, of course, our school administration, particularly for our faculty, but Human Resources has a piece in that as well. Performance management. Is our staff clear on what their responsibilities are? And do they have very timely feedback on how well they're doing? And are they held accountable for that? Policy development. Do we have any gaps in our policy? How is our culture and our mission, as Cheryl mentioned, how is that evident in the policies that we have? General administration, data, our human resource information system, or whatever systems we use to ensure that we have accurate employee data. Engagement, measuring our level of engagement with our faculty and staff members, taking employee pulse surveys and employee opinion surveys, interpreting those results and creating action items that are in keeping with our mission and the feedback and the culture. And employee welfare, safety and security, everything from, do we have a flood in an office that's causing an unsafe climate for our employees, to how do we partner with administration for building security to ensure that our staff are safe, and employee recognition. What are we doing day to day to ensure our employees feel valued and recognized, whether that's celebrating their years of service, celebrating a marriage. We have a long list for employee recognition here at Mercy. And all that with our favorite catch-all phrase of "and other duties as assigned." We're all part of the Mercy mission, and we know that we do whatever we need to do on a day-to-day basis to help those around us. And we take on much more than what we're typically assigned to do, because we're all team players. And all this in a way that supports the mission and that is in keeping with the critical concerns of the Sisters of Mercy. So I'm going to spend a few moments talking about how we can resource the HR function. You may see yourself in one of these models or many of them, depending on your school and what the scope and complexity is of your school. And then what I'll do is sort of take you down a little bit of a case study of Mercy in Rochester and describe a little bit about how the human resource function is evolving, what some of our challenges are, and what it may look like in the future. So the first approach or model is a dedicated HR function or person. An HR professional, whether that's full or part-time. I'll take you through some pros and cons for each of the models that I'll be describing. The pro of having a dedicated HR professional is that there's focus on that function, obviously. It can be very difficult to combine the HR function with another role at a school. because you only have a certain amount of bandwidth. And as Cheryl and I described, human resources can be a very complex function, and the focus on that can suffer if there's not a dedicated person in that role. The con of that is that, of course, there's a long-term budget impact for the salary for that person. But on the flip side of that, sometimes a dedicated HR person can actually save you money. So we'll talk about some opportunities for that. Second model is a combination. You can combine your HR function with other functions in the school. So for example, accounting and finance, or another administrative function. A combination that goes together very often is payroll and human resources, or payroll and benefits administration. The pro for that model is there's of course a lower budget impact, but the con is that you may only be covering the basics of human resources and not more of the some of the more very, very complex challenges that come along with problem resolution and employee relations. Another model is to completely outsource the function to a consultant or a contractor. And that has many options that go along with it. You can do that short term, you can do that long term. You can outsource just one project, or you can supplement some of your current staffing with a consultant or a contractor. The advantage of that is that it provides a lot of flexibility with not a lot of long-term commitment. The con is that it can be quite costly depending on the length of those assignments. And then last but not least, a hybrid and any combination of the above. And all of this depends on, and these choices depend on the scope of your school, how complex are your needs, what is your culture ready for, and when is your culture ready for that function. So to take you down a path of a case study, I'll spend a few minutes talking about our school in Rochester. Very high level, our scope is, just to give you an idea of what the HR function supports in terms of scope. We are grades 6 through 12 with 803 students. We have 97 employees, 60 faculty or administrators, 19 and a half staff, and 1.5 HR folks. The staff, I just want to point out, includes our admissions folks, fundraising and advancement, finance, and office staff. So the HR function here at Mercy was really a combined function until about a year ago. I went down the various models that we had, and I think here at Mercy we've checked almost every box of each one of those models. A year ago, the HR function was combined with finance. So our VP of Finance and our payroll specialist were responsible for compensation and benefits, and of course all the finances that go along with that, as well as payroll. Staffing was decentralized. So when I say decentralized, the athletics department hired their own coaches, the principal hired faculty, the office staff hired office staff. So hiring was happening, and it was happening in a decentralized way. Administration was responsible for training and development, particularly of faculty, and each staff department was responsible for identifying any training that their particular folks would need. Fundraising would identify training for the fundraising staff and so on. Employee relations was handled at one point through our faculty. We had a faculty employee who had experience in the public schools with negotiations and employee negotiations with labor unions. And at one point, he was tapped on to be the clearinghouse to help resolve some employee relations issues. We had an outsourced consultant who helped pull together our employee handbook. We had legal and still have legal representation, and counsel is needed. We currently have 2 attorneys here that we utilize who have specialization in educational law. And then we have a faculty and staff advisory board, which is a cross-functional group of administrators, faculty. I serve on that board as well. And that is meant to be a clearinghouse for any employee concerns and input. So this was the model until about a year ago. What worked well was it was very cost effective, particularly because we have experts here in financials in our finance department. It was obviously a combined, a very hybrid model. But opportunities around the way it was that there wasn't a dedicated focus on employee advocacy, and we were lacking some confidence among the faculty population in employee relations and problem resolution. That led to the school to looking into hiring a dedicated HR function. So a year ago, the Director of Human Resources position was established, and that's my current position. Once I came on board last February, the approach that I took was to understand the culture and the climate first. And I met with all employees, and I looked at the current state. At that time, an employee opinion survey had been administered a year prior. So we also had some data, some very quantitative data on the current state. Meeting with all the employees gave me quite a bit of qualitative data as well. Shortly after that, that took about 2.5 months or so. The board convened an HR committee with current members of the board and community members. And through that board, and through the qualitative and the quantitative look at the current state, we developed an HR strategic plan, but very high level. The focus of that plan, and the focus on the day-to-day work along with that plan was centralizing staffing, first of all. That became a very timely need because we had some key positions that were open, including principal, and president, among others. Since last February, we have filled, this says 26 positions. Actually, as of last week, it's 28 positions. And I include internal positions in this number because we've had quite a bit of shifting in our staff positions, which has been a real celebration. We've been able to use the gifts and talents of some of our folks who have been here a while. And we've been able to give them opportunities in other positions here on staff, and it's been a real win-win. And I include that because the level of effort from an HR perspective to fill an internal position can sometimes be more than it is to fill an external position. So I include those as just as if they were a normal open position. We centralized our budget. We took dollars that were in general finance, in the general finance budget, and dedicated it to a separate human resource budget that would include staffing, recognition, anything that we would need for legal counsel, also for training and development and so on. And I worked on employee relations. So those were that was the focus on the day-to-day work, and really continues to be that focus since last February. Concurrent to that, we worked on some foundational work around policy and procedure and our employee handbook. Continuing on the theme of decentralization, we had 3 handbooks, one for all employees, one for faculty, and one for coaches. So there's an opportunity to really bring those three together and fill in any gaps that might be there. So that was part of the foundational work. And then in addition, to look at excellence and accountability, we took a look at our current state of our performance management and our performance reviews. What is that current process? And we eventually will look at what do we want that process to be. So that'll give you a perspective on the day-to-day work and some of the foundational work that actually we continue to do. The things that really enable us to do that are working on our employee data, which is our HRIS. We have a very robust HRIS system. It happens to be the same system we use to manage our benefits open enrollment and our benefits administration. We were not utilizing that database as much as we could to have easy access to the data that we need to do our day-to-day jobs. So focusing on utilizing our HRIS and making that as robust as it can be was identified as a key enabler. Another key enabler was adding a half of an HR position. What became evident over the first 6 months or so was that the amount of foundational work that we needed to accomplish was difficult to do without having an additional half FTE to help with some of the day-to-day benefits administration work. So we were able to add a half of an FTE. Her name is Tricia Piramico. She has a dual reporting relationship to finance and to HR. She has taken on building our HRIS, helping with payroll, and helping with benefits administration. Likely she will eventually help with staffing as well. And all that with communication and prioritization and support from the board and the president and the principal. I'll stop there just for a moment. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Patty from Cincinnati. When going back to your sort of first step, which was to take your current state pulse, were those surveys that you developed yourself, or did you use some sort of technology-enabled platform, SurveyMonkey, or some other way where you have an opportunity to benchmark against other like institutions, or perhaps against the secondary education or education overall?
A great question. The survey that was done, let's see, gosh, now it's about 2.5 years ago, was a survey that was done by a local HR consulting company. The model of it was it was business related. However, the questions were very relevant. So I think it gave very, very good directionally correct data. And what was really key, and I do think is key with any survey, is it offered an opportunity for comments. So in addition to the data, the qualitative information that came through that survey was also really key, looking at the current state. And especially considering that it was the first one that was accomplished, I think it gave the board terrific data. Moving forward, what we will likely do is take a few of the opportunity areas from that survey and ask the exact same questions, because they were very relevant, whether it was business type survey or focused on education. We'll take a couple of those questions that were opportunity areas and re-ask them as a pulse survey, and also provide comments. And we'll do that on a SurveyMonkey administered through our board chair, so that it's completely confidential, and we'll take a look at what the pulse is from that. And that'll give us a baseline, because we have a baseline from 2.5 years ago from the first survey. That'll give us a very clear picture of how well we're doing in those opportunity areas. Then if we go out with another full survey, I think we would likely look at a survey administered through an educational consultant so that we'll have a bank of data to look at for benchmarking.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. So one of the key challenges, as Cheryl alluded to in her section, is the challenge of education around the HR role. And what is it? Because at the point that I came on board a year ago, of course, there hadn't been a dedicated function here. And I included one of my favorite quotes here from one of our employees as we were talking through an employee relations issue and trying to get to some problem resolution and negotiation. And I asked the employees, well, what was your idea of the HR role? And that employee said to me, administrative. So that said to me that we had some education to do around what the role could offer. And administrative is absolutely a huge part of the role. But just like any professional role in any organization, whether it's a school or a business, there's a spectrum at which you work, from the day-to-day to anything long-term, future, and mission-driven. So we took the opportunity to talk to the faculty about the HR role, to show them the plan, the things that that we're working on, as well as talking to administration to even further understand what some of their challenges were and what they expected from the role. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time focusing on in the HR role that's sort of not necessarily administrative, that are quite complex and quite time consuming, is anything job related. So any new work in the school, any significant shifting of work, basically the who and what of work was an opportunity to talk through. Again, I mentioned earlier that we had quite a few people posting for internal positions. And whenever we do that, we take the opportunity to look at what was that employee doing in their current role and what will they be doing in their future role. And we've been taking the opportunity to document that, shift work, close gaps, ensure that we're compensating those roles correctly and that they have the proper FLSA status. Along what comes with that is sometimes process changes, because anytime that you change a person or a job, generally that affects a process. So we have the opportunity to do that as well quite often. Any questions relating to pay, scheduling, part-time, full-time, 11-month, 10-month, 12-month, we have many questions about that as well. And then questions, of course, regarding performance and documentation and so on. Generally, that's more on the administration side. And then in addition, some of the more challenging work is our employee relations function. Usually those include requests outside of normal policies and procedures, bringing comfort to employees when there's any ambiguity around that, recurring complaints or interpersonal issues, problem resolution. One of the biggest challenges in human resources is being the objective listener and giving administration as well as faculty both opportunities and an ear to sort through challenges and problems. Employee relations, of course, can include any behavior not in keeping with the Mercy values or our mission. And then last but not least, any legal issues such as perceived discrimination or harassment. And these are very, 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 few and far between. And I'm not even saying that we've encountered all of this, but based on my, former experience, when these things do occur, they are quite time consuming. And so this job-related work and the employee relations work was some of the education that was helpful I think, for me to engage in conversation with both faculty and administration. And what I always left them with is, when in doubt, just ask. And the question could be, I don't know if I should talk to you about this, but, and I said, well, just tell me what's on your mind, and then what I can do is provide guidance. So we would rather be informed than not informed. Then what's very important is we don't always have the answer. HR does not always have the answer. We have many, many resources that we can call upon when we need help. One is legal counsel, which is a very critical support to the HR function. Generally, if a issue is at a certain level of escalation, we call in our legal counsel, or to do a sense check on compliance or some more complicated employee relations issues. Cheryl mentioned, and I jotted this down, is that things are not usually cut and dried. And it's a very, very, very rare situation that anything is very cut and dried. So it's often very helpful to have a sense check with legal counsel on an approach to either resolving employee relations issue or as a last case resort, a termination. I found our legal counsel often provides training at no cost. We're on an email list, and especially for compliance. So it's a great way to get training at no cost to your school. But it is not a replacement for the HR function. It can be very expensive. It's not a dedicated resource, and it can be very perceived as punitive. I think that's really important. The legal counsel should really be a backdrop to the HR function and very transparent to employees. Really shouldn't be involved in interactions with the legal counsel at all. Professional organizations have been very critical for additional resources as well. If you are not a member of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, I'd strongly encourage that. I use SHRM as a resource almost weekly. It's terrific for policy benchmarking, for procedural help, law, state law. It is a wealth of information. The National Human Resource Association is another professional organization. They have local chapters that also provide free training. And National Association for Independent Schools, we use that quite a bit for benchmarking. We're looking into a full membership, but there's quite a bit of free information on their website as well, particularly for staffing. We do a lot of benchmarking with NAIS for role descriptions. Another resource, interns and volunteers. We have community and board members who are very willing to share their time and expertise with the school, as well as students in local colleges. We have many on paths for educational certifications and so on, and we're currently working with one who is helping us with our faculty handbook and revising that. Also, the MESA cohort, we often utilize the finance cohort for benchmarking. Right now, there's not the dedicated HR cohort, but we can plug into the finance cohort for any benchmarking we need to do. And there's always Google. I've utilized Google quite a bit to look at other Catholic school policy and procedure and so on. It gives us a good idea what else is out there. So lots of additional resources because we do not always have all the answers. That is the conclusion of the nitty-gritty part of HR and a little case study of how we have implemented it here at Mercy in Rochester. And I just wanted to open it up for any questions you might have.